In the misty mountains of northern China, where ancient legends still whispered through the valleys, lived a creature that defied all expectations. The villagers of Longshan had discovered him 20 years ago, a young dragon barely the size of a large dog, abandoned in a cave near the sacred waterfall. His scales were the color of moonlight, shimmering between silver and pearl, but his eyes were clouded white, unseeing from birth. The village elders had argued for days about what to do with the blind creature. Dragons were revered in their culture, symbols of power and wisdom, protectors of the land. But a blind dragon? Many saw it as a curse, a bad omen that would bring misfortune to their community. Some wanted to drive him away, fearing that his disability made him worthless, unable to fulfill the traditional role of a dragon guardian. Old Master Chun, the village's most respected scholar and keeper of ancient texts, had intervened. He remembered obscure passages in forgotten scrolls that spoke of dragons with unusual gifts, powers that manifested in unexpected ways. Against strong opposition, he convinced the village council to let the dragons stay. Taking personal responsibility for the creature they came to call Yinlong, meaning silver dragon. Years passed, and Yinlong grew slowly, reaching only the size of a small horse, while other dragons his age would tower over buildings. The villagers' initial fear turned to pity, then to dismissive acceptance. Children would sometimes throw pebbles at him, knowing he couldn't see to dodge. Merchants passing through would laugh at the village's defective guardian, spreading tales of the useless blind dragon throughout the region. Yinlong spent his days curled in the courtyard of Master Chen's modest home, his head always tilted as if listening to something others couldn't hear. He never complained about his treatment, never lashed out at his tormentors. Master Chen would often find him in strange positions, his blind eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids, his body trembling as if experiencing something profound. The other villages in the region boasted mighty dragon protectors who could summon storms, breathe fire that could melt stone, or fly so high they could touch the stars. These dragons fought off bandits, predicted weather for crops, and performed magnificent displays during festivals. Meanwhile, Yinlong could barely navigate the familiar paths of the village without bumping into walls, relying on his heightened hearing and the patient guidance of Master Chun. During village meetings, people would openly mock their situation. "What use is a blind dragon?" they would say. "He cannot see danger approaching. He cannot fly to scout for threats. He cannot even find his own food without help." The younger villagers were especially cruel, seeing Yinlong as a symbol of their village's declining status among neighboring communities. Master Chen bore these insults with quiet dignity, but inside, his heart ached for the gentle creature. He had raised Yinlong like a son, teaching him through patient repetition, using bells and chimes to help him navigate, reading to him from ancient texts, even though many thought it pointless to educate a creature who could never use such knowledge. What the villagers didn't know was that Yinlong was beginning to manifest an ability that Master Chun had only read about in the most ancient and cryptic texts. Sometimes, the dragon would suddenly freeze, his blind eyes widening as if seeing something terrifying or beautiful. He would whisper warnings that made no sense. The merchant should not take the mountain pass tomorrow, or plant the rice 2 days early this season. Most dismissed these utterances as the ramblings of a damaged mind. But Master Chun kept careful records, noting each prediction in his journal. He began to notice a pattern that sent chills down his spine and filled him with equal parts wonder and fear. The breaking point came during the harvest festival of Yinlong's 20th year. The village had invited neighboring communities to join the celebration, hoping to improve their standing and perhaps arrange some advantageous marriages for their young people. The visiting villages brought their own dragons, magnificent creatures who performed aerial displays and demonstrated their powers to the amazement of all. First came Huolong, the fire dragon of the eastern village, his red scales gleaming as he breathed columns of flame that painted pictures in the night sky. Then came Shuilong, the water dragon of the river valley, who made the fountain dance and created rainbow mist that delighted the children. Even young Fenlong, the wind dragon from the mountain village, showed off by creating tiny tornadoes that juggled colorful ribbons. When it came time for Longshan to present their dragon, the village elders tried to skip their turn, claiming Yinlong was feeling unwell. But the visiting dignitaries insisted, their smirks barely hidden. They had heard the stories and wanted to see the useless blind dragon for themselves. Reluctantly, Master Chun led Yinlong into the festival square. The silver dragon moved slowly, carefully feeling his way with each step. The crowd fell silent, then began to murmur with a mixture of pity and disdain. Some of the visiting children laughed outright, until their parents half-heartedly shushed them. "Show us your power, blind one," called out the proud rider of Huolong, his voice dripping with mock courtesy. Surely even a disabled dragon has some small talent to share. Yinlong stood still in the center of the square, his head bowed. Master Chun placed a comforting hand on his smooth scales, whispering words of encouragement. The dragon lifted his head slightly, his clouded eyes seeming to focus on something none of them could see. "I cannot breathe fire," Yinlong said, his voice soft but clear, carrying across the square. "I cannot summon storms or command the wind." The crowd's murmuring grew louder, some people starting to turn away in secondhand embarrassment. "But I can see," the dragon continued, and the crowd paused, confused. "See what?" someone shouted from the back. "You're blind." Yinlong's response would change everything. "I see the threads of time," he said. "I see what was, what is, and what may yet be. I see the choices that lead to prosperity and those that lead to ruin. I see the moments that matter and the consequences they carry." The crowd erupted in laughter. Even some of Longshan's own villagers joined in, their faces red with shame at this grandiose claim from their disabled dragon. But Master Chin noticed something that made his blood run cold. Yinlong's eyes had begun to glow with a faint inner light, and his body was trembling with an energy he had never seen before. "Tomorrow," Yinlong said, his voice taking on an otherworldly quality, "the merchant Wang will lose his entire caravan in the mountain pass because he will choose to take the shorter route despite the warnings of weather. 3 days hence, the river will begin to rise, and those who do not move their grain stores will lose half their harvest. In 1 week, a child will fall into the old well behind the temple, but she will be saved if someone checks it at midday." The laughter died away, replaced by uncomfortable silence. The visiting dragons shifted uneasily, sensing something in Yinlong that their riders could not. But the spell was broken when the leader of the visiting delegation, a pompous official from the provincial capital, stood up. "Enough of this nonsense," he declared. "Anyone can make wild predictions. This is just a desperate attempt to save face. I've seen enough. Longshan, your dragon is indeed as useless as the stories say. Perhaps it will be merciful to put the poor creature out of its misery." The official's words cut deep, and many in the crowd nodded in agreement. Some of Longshan's villagers hung their heads in shame, while others began to discuss whether the official might be right. Master Chan felt Yinlong shrink back, the brief glow fading from his eyes. As the festival continued without them, Master Chun led Yinlong back home. The dragon was silent, but the old scholar could feel his pain. That night, Master Chun made a decision. He would start documenting every prediction Yinlong made, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. He would prove to everyone that this gentle, blind creature was far from useless. The next morning brought news that shook the village. Merchant Wang's caravan had indeed been caught in a sudden mountain storm. He had ignored the warnings of local guides about the weather, choosing the shorter but more dangerous path to save time. His entire shipment of silk and precious goods was lost when a mudslide swept away half his wagons. Wang himself barely survived, pulled from the debris by his loyal guards. It was a coincidence, people said. Lucky guess. Storms were common in the mountains this time of year. But Master Chun carefully noted it in his journal, the first confirmed prediction in what would become a remarkable record. 3 days later, just as Yinlong had foretold, the river began to rise. It wasn't the dramatic flood some might have expected, but a steady, unusual increase in water level for that time of year. Most villagers ignored it, but a few who had been present at the festival quietly moved their grain stores to higher ground. When the river crested 2 days later, flooding the lower storage areas, those few farmers saved their entire harvest while others lost substantial portions of their grain. The week passed with growing tension. Some villagers found excuses to linger near the old well behind the temple, though none would admit they believed the blind dragon's warning. On the appointed day, at exactly midday, a young mother walking past heard a small cry. Her daughter had indeed wandered off and fallen into the well while chasing a butterfly. Because people were nearby, alert to the possibility, the child was quickly rescued with only minor scrapes. Word of these events spread quickly through the village, then beyond. The same people who had mocked Yin Long began to whisper among themselves. How had he known? What did it mean when he said he could see the threads of time? Master Chun found himself fielding visits from curious villagers, some skeptical, others beginning to believe. But the visiting officials and dragon riders had long since returned to their homes, spreading their version of events. In their telling, Longshan's dragon was a pitiful creature who made wild claims to compensate for his uselessness. The stories grew in the telling, painting Yin Long as everything from a fraud to a deluded beast lost in fantasy. Master Chun watched Yin Long carefully in the days following the festival. The dragon seemed to withdraw even more, spending hours in meditation like stillness. Sometimes Chun would catch him whispering to himself, his blind eyes moving as if watching invisible scenes play out before him. "What do you see, my friend?" Chun asked one evening as they sat in the garden, the cherry blossoms falling around them like snow. "Too much," Yin Long replied softly. "I see the paths spreading out from every choice, every moment. I see the merchant who lost his goods. In another path, he listened to wisdom and took the longer route. His silk would have made him wealthy enough to send his son to the Imperial Academy. That son would have become a doctor who saved hundreds of lives. Now that future is lost, replaced by another where the son becomes a bitter merchant, always chasing his father's lost fortune." Chun felt a chill run through him. "You see all possible futures?" "Not all," Yin Long corrected. "I see the threads most likely to weave into reality. The strongest possibilities. Time is like a river with many channels. Some dry up, others become the main flow. I can see where the current is strongest, where the channels are likely to merge or divide." "That's an incredible gift," Chen said, but Yin Long shook his great head. "Is it? To see 1,000 tragedies that might be prevented, but to be dismissed as useless? To know that my warnings could save lives, prevent disasters, guide people to better choices, but to be laughed at and ignored? Sometimes I think the other dragons are blessed. They can act directly, breathe fire to drive off bandits, summon rain for crops. I can only speak of what I see, and who listens to a blind dragon?" The conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the village. A messenger had arrived from the provincial capital with disturbing news. The region was facing a crisis. The annual rains had failed, crops were withering, and bandit groups were growing bolder, raiding villages with increasing frequency. The governor was calling for a council of all villages and their dragon protectors to coordinate a response. Longshan's village elders met in emergency session. Some argued they should not attend, that bringing Yin Long would only invite more mockery and damage their ability to get help. Others felt they had no choice but to answer the governor's summons, even if it meant further humiliation. Master Chen listened to the debate with growing frustration. He thought of all the predictions Yin Long had made that had come true, all carefully documented in his journals. But he also knew that a few local examples would not be enough to overcome the widespread perception of Yin Long as useless. As the arguments continued late into the night, a young village girl named Mei approached Master Chun. She was one of the few children who had always been kind to Yin Long, often bringing him flower chains and sitting with him in the garden. "Master Chun," she said quietly, "Yin Long told me something yesterday. He said the drought will break in the southern mountains first, in exactly 13 days. He said there's a choice coming that will determine whether our region survives or falls into chaos. He seemed very sad when he told me. Chen knelt down to the girl's level. Did he say anything else? May nodded, her eyes wide. He said the threads are tangling, that too many paths lead to darkness. He said he needs to be at the council, even if they don't want him there. He said sometimes being dismissed as useless is its own kind of power because no one guards against the powerless. The old scholar felt his heart skip. He thanked May and hurried back to his home, where he found Yin Long in an agitated state, pacing the courtyard despite the difficulty his blindness caused. You've seen something? Chen said. It wasn't a question. A convergence, Yin Long replied, his voice tight with strain. Many threads meeting at a single point. The council will make decisions that echo through generations. I see war and peace balanced on the edge of a blade. I see choices that seem wise leading to disaster, and choices that seem foolish leading to salvation. I must be there, Master Chen. They won't listen, they never do, but I must try. Chen made his decision. The next morning, he stood before the village elders and announced that he would take Yin Long to the council, with or without official approval. If they wished to send another representative, so be it, but he would not let this opportunity pass. The elders reluctantly agreed, appointing Chen as Longshan's official representative. As they prepared for the journey, Chen noticed something changing in Yin Long. The dragon seemed to be growing more focused, more determined. His usual gentle demeanor was still there, but underneath was a steel that Chen had not seen before. For 20 years, I have been dismissed and mocked, Yin Long said as Chen packed supplies for their journey. I have accepted it, believing that perhaps they were right, that a blind dragon truly is useless. But I see now that my sight comes with responsibility. Whether they listen or not, I must speak what I see. The threads of time are showing me something terrible approaching, something that could destroy everything we know. And somehow, in ways I don't yet understand, my blindness and their dismissal of me is part of how it might be prevented. As they set out on the road to the provincial capital, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking toward a moment that would change everything. The blind dragon who had been dismissed as useless for 2 decades was about to reveal the true extent of his power. What worried Chen most was Yin Long's cryptic comment about his dismissal being part of the solution. What did it mean? How could being ignored and mocked be a form of power? The journey would take 3 days, and with each step, Chen noticed Yin Long becoming more agitated. The dragon would stop suddenly, his head turning as if following something invisible across the sky. He would mutter about threads crossing, paths diverging, choices cascading into consequences. On the second night of their journey, as they camped by a stream, Yin Long spoke more clearly than he had in days. Master Chen, at the council, when they mock me, and they will mock me, you must not defend me. Let them dismiss me entirely. Let them forget I'm even there. The threads show me that only from the shadows of their disregard can I see what needs to be seen and act when action is needed. I don't understand, Chen admitted. Neither do I fully, Yin Long said. But I see myself dismissed and forgotten in the corner of the Great Hall. And from that position of being utterly ignored, I see myself preventing a catastrophe. The powerful rarely guard against the powerless. In their arrogance, they will reveal things they would hide from those they respect. My blindness, my uselessness in their eyes, will be my greatest strength. As they approached the capital, Chen saw other dragons in the sky, magnificent creatures arriving for the council. Fire dragons, water dragons, earth dragons, wind dragons, all the varieties of power and might that the region boasted. And here was Yin Long, walking slowly along the ground, feeling his way with careful steps, unable to fly, unable to see the road ahead. But Chen remembered the predictions that had come true, the lives already saved by those who had quietly listened to the blind dragon's warnings. He thought of little May and the other children who saw past Yin Long's disability to the gentle wisdom beneath. Most of all, he thought of the journals he carried, documenting 20 years of dismissed predictions, many of which had come to pass exactly as foretold. The capital city loomed before them, its great walls and towers a testament to human ambition and dragon partnership. Somewhere in that maze of streets and buildings, a council was gathering that would determine the fate of the region. And somehow, a blind dragon dismissed as useless held the key to their survival. As they entered the city gates, Yinlong raised his head, his clouded eyes seeming to pierce through time itself. "It begins," he whispered. "The threads are converging. Everything I have been, everything they think I am, has led to this moment. Master Chun, my friend, prepare yourself. Before this is over, you will see why the universe sometimes grants its greatest gifts in the guise of what seems like a curse." Chen placed his hand on Yinlong's scales, feeling the tremor of power that ran through the dragon's body. Whatever was coming, whatever role Yinlong was meant to play, it would challenge everything everyone believed about power, purpose, and the true nature of sight. The Grand Council Hall stood before them, its doors open to receive the dragons and their companions. From within came the sounds of mighty roars and demonstrations of power as the assembled dragons announced their presence. Yinlong paused at the threshold, taking a deep breath. 20 years of being called useless, he said softly. 20 years of preparation for this moment. They will mock me one more time, Master Chun. But this time, their mockery will be the key that unlocks the door to their salvation. The blind dragon they dismissed today will be the one who sees the path through the darkness ahead. With that, they entered the hall, where fate waited to unfold its complex design. The threads of time were indeed converging, and at their center stood a blind dragon, dismissed but not defeated, powerless in the eyes of the world, but holding a power that transcended physical sight. The first chapter of Yinlong's true purpose was about to be written, and the pen would be held by those who never suspected that their dismissal and mockery were part of a greater design. In the grand tapestry of time that only Yinlong could see, every thread had its place, even the dark ones woven from ridicule and rejection. The Grand Council Hall of the provincial capital was a marvel of architecture, its domed ceiling painted with murals of legendary dragons from centuries past. Massive pillars carved from single blocks of jade supported the structure, and the floor was polished marble that reflected the light of 1,000 lanterns. Dragons of every size and element had gathered, their human companions and riders forming clusters around them. As Master Chun led Yinlong into the hall, conversations gradually died away. The blind dragon's slow, careful steps echoed in the growing silence. Chen could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, could hear the whispers starting like wind through grass. "Is that really the blind dragon of Longshan? Even smaller than I heard. Look how he stumbles. Pathetic. What were they thinking, bringing such a creature here?" Yinlong kept his head high despite the mockery, allowing Chan to guide him to a corner of the hall where they could observe without blocking others' view. The dragon settled himself carefully, his unseeing eyes turned toward the center of the room where a raised platform awaited the governor's arrival. Chen noticed how the other dragons instinctively moved away from them, as if Yinlong's blindness might be contagious. Even the servants distributing refreshments seemed to forget their corner existed. Within minutes of their arrival, they had been effectively rendered invisible. The governor entered with great ceremony, accompanied by his advisors and military commanders. He was a stern man in his 50s, his face marked by years of difficult decisions. Behind him came his own dragon, a magnificent golden creature whose scales caught the light like captured sunbeams. "Honored dragons and esteemed companions," the governor began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We face unprecedented challenges. The drought has lasted longer than any in living memory. Our reserves dwindle while bandit groups grow bolder. 3 villages were raided just this week. We must coordinate our response before the situation spirals beyond recovery." A fire dragon from the northern provinces spoke first, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "My flames can clear land for new irrigation channels. Give me workers, and we can redirect the mountain streams." "And when there are no streams to redirect," challenged a water dragon, her scales shimmering blue-green. "I have exhausted myself trying to call rain." The skies remained stubborn. Arguments erupted around the hall as dragons and humans alike proposed solutions, criticized others' ideas, and defended their own territory's needs. Chen watched Long carefully. The blind dragon sat perfectly still, his head tilted as if listening to more than just the words being spoken. Suddenly, Long tensed. His clouded eyes began to move rapidly, tracking something invisible. "No," he whispered, so quietly only Chun could hear. "Not that path. Can't they see where it leads?" The debate had turned to military responses. A war dragon, scarred from many battles, was advocating for a united force to hunt down the bandit groups. "Strike them hard and fast," he growled. "Make examples of them. Fear will restore order. Fear will drive more to desperation," countered another dragon. "We need to address why people turn to banditry. The failed crops, the empty stomachs." The governor raised his hand for silence. "Both approaches have merit. We will form strike forces to protect our supply routes, while also implementing rationing programs to ensure fair distribution." Long's agitation grew. Chen saw the dragon's claws extending and retracting unconsciously, a sign of extreme distress. "The threads are tangling," Long murmured. "They're choosing paths that seem logical but lead to chaos. The bandits, they're not what they appear to be." Before Chun could ask what he meant, a commotion arose near the main entrance. A messenger rushed in, falling to his knees before the governor. "Excellence, urgent news. The Jade Mountain Monastery has been attacked. The monks, they're all dead. The sacred scrolls, stolen." Shocked gasps echoed through the hall. The monastery had stood for over 1,000 years, protected by ancient wards and dragon blessings. That it could fall seemed impossible. "Which bandit group dares such sacrilege?" the governor demanded. "That's just it, Excellence. The survivors from a nearby village say the attackers wore no identifying marks, fought with military precision, and they had help. A dragon's flame cleared their escape route." The hall erupted. Dragons roared accusations at each other. No dragon would aid in such desecration. It was unthinkable. Yet the evidence was clear. Trust, already strained by the crisis, shattered like ice in spring. In their forgotten corner, Long began to speak, his voice distant and dreamy. "The monastery was just the beginning. They seek the scroll of binding, the ancient treaty that keeps the balance between human and dragon. Without it, the old laws become void. Chaos serves their purpose. Division makes us weak." "Who?" Chun whispered urgently. "Who is behind this?" "I see faces hidden behind masks. Dragons whose loyalty was bought with promises of power. I see a shadow pulling strings, turning our strength against us. But the threads, they shift and change. Nothing is certain yet." The council dissolved into bitter arguments. Regional loyalties trumped unified purpose. Some dragons accused others of harboring traitors. Human companions questioned their dragons' allegiances. The governor struggled to maintain order as the assembly fractured. Hours passed in fruitless debate. Long remained silent in his corner, forgotten by all except Chun. The old scholar noticed how the dragon's breathing had changed, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. He had seen this before. Long was entering a deep trance, following the threads of time to their conclusions. As night fell, the governor called for a recess. "We reconvene at dawn. Use this time to cool tempers and seek wisdom. We must not let suspicion divide us when unity is our only hope." The dragons and their companions dispersed to quarters throughout the capital. Chun secured modest lodgings near the government district, helping Long navigate the unfamiliar streets. Once settled, the dragon finally spoke. "Master Chun, I need you to do something that will seem like betrayal." Chen's stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "Tomorrow, when the council resumes, you must denounce me. Call me delusional. Claim my predictions are lucky guesses. Make them dismiss me completely. Ensure they pay me no attention whatsoever." "I won't do that," Chen said firmly. "You've been mocked enough. Your gift is real, and they need to know no." Long's interruption was sharp. "They must not know. Not yet. I've seen the threads. Master Chun. There is a traitor in the council, someone who reports everything to our true enemy. If they suspect I can see through time, if they think my warnings might be heeded, they will kill us both before we can act. Then we should leave. Warn the authorities privately. Yinlong shook his great head. Which authorities? The corruption runs deep, though most don't know they serve the shadow. No, our only chance is to be dismissed so thoroughly that the enemy doesn't see us as a threat. From that position of complete irrelevance, I can watch the threads and act when the moment comes. Chun spent a sleepless night wrestling with the request. Everything in him rebelled against adding to Yinlong's humiliation. Yet he had learned to trust the dragon's visions, even when they seemed to lead through darkness. Dawn came too soon. The council reconvened with tensions still high. The governor attempted to restore order, proposing systematic approaches to their various crises. Maps were spread showing affected regions. Dragons demonstrated their abilities, proving their readiness to help. Then, as if prompted by some invisible cue, one of the minor officials noticed Yinlong in his corner. "Why is that creature even here?" he asked loudly. "What possible contribution can a blind dragon make to our efforts?" Chun felt the moment arrive like a physical weight. He stood, his legs unsteady. "Honored council," he began, his voice cracking. "I must apologize for my dragon's presence. I have indulged his fantasies for too long. He claims to see the future, but I now realize these are merely the delusions of a mind trying to compensate for physical inadequacy." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. He saw Yinlong lower his head, playing the part of the exposed fraud. Scattered laughter rippled through the hall. "You see," the official continued, emboldened. "Even his own companion admits the truth. This is what happens when sentiment overrules sense. A blind dragon is useless, no matter what stories we tell ourselves." Shin forced himself to continue. "You're right. His predictions, lucky guesses at best. I've been a fool, wanting to believe that his disability hid some greater purpose. I see now that I've wasted 20 years caring for a creature who contributes nothing." The laughter grew louder. Some dragons snorted derision. Others looked away in second-hand embarrassment. The governor himself seemed uncomfortable with the display, but didn't intervene. "Perhaps," suggested a merchant representative, "the blind one could serve as a cautionary tale. Let him stay in his corner as a reminder of what happens when we cling to false hope instead of facing hard truths." "An excellent idea," the governor agreed, eager to move past the uncomfortable scene. "Now, to serious matters. We've received reports of grain shipments disappearing. Not stolen, simply vanishing without trace. Our supply situation grows critical." As discussions resumed, Chun returned to Yinlong's side. The dragon whispered almost inaudibly, "Well done, my friend. Now we are truly invisible. Watch and listen. The enemy will reveal themselves." The council sessions continued for 3 days. Each day brought worse news. Wells were running dry in unprecedented numbers. Disease had broken out in the refugee camps. The bandit attacks grew more coordinated, always striking where defenses were weakest. Through it all, Yinlong sat forgotten in his corner, dismissed as thoroughly as if he didn't exist. But Chun, watching closely, saw how the dragon's attention focused on certain individuals. His unseeing eyes tracked specific conversations. His breathing would quicken when particular plans were discussed. On the third night, as they returned to their lodgings, Yinlong spoke urgently. "Tomorrow. It happens tomorrow. The shadow makes its move. They will propose dividing our forces, sending each dragon to defend only their home region. It seems logical, protect what's yours. But it's a trap. Divided, we fall one by one." "Who is the shadow?" Shin asked. "Who leads this conspiracy? I cannot see their face clearly. The threads around them are clouded, protected by old magic. But I know their agent in the council. Tomorrow, when the crucial vote comes, watch the Golden Dragon's rider. Not the governor, but the one who stands always in his shadow. He carries a jade pendant that glows with unnatural light. He is the puppeteer's hand. Shouldn't we expose him tonight? With what proof? The word of a blind dragon already dismissed as delusional? No, we must wait. The threads show me a moment of perfect clarity coming. When the shadow overreaches, thinking victory assured, then we strike. But timing is everything. Too early, and we're dismissed as mad. Too late, and the damage cannot be undone. The fourth day of council dawned gray and oppressive. The air itself felt heavy with impending catastrophe. As Long had predicted, the proposal to divide forces was presented early in the session. It came from a respected military commander, his logic seemingly flawless. "We waste energy trying to coordinate across vast distances," the commander argued. "Let each dragon return to their region with authority to act as needed. We can reconvene once the immediate crises pass." Support grew quickly. Dragons naturally prefer to protect their own territories. The plan would give them autonomy, freedom from bureaucratic delays. Even those initially skeptical began to see merit in the approach. Chun watched the governor's assistant, the man Long had identified. He stood behind his master looking appropriately concerned, but Chun caught him touching a pendant beneath his robe's jade, just as Long had seen. When support for division reached critical mass, the assistant allowed himself a small smile. The vote was called. One by one, dragons and representatives voiced their support. The unity that had protected the region for generations was about to shatter. Chun felt Long tense beside him, the dragon's body coiling like a spring. "Wait for it," Long breathed. "The shadow grows confident. He will reveal himself in victory." The vote was nearly unanimous. Only a few holdouts remained, quickly pressured to conform. The governor raised his hand to make it official. At that moment, his assistant stepped forward. "Excellence," the man said smoothly. "Perhaps we should also discuss the redistribution of the emergency supplies." With each region acting independently, certain adjustments to delivery schedules would be logical. The governor nodded absently, focused on formalizing the vote. But Long suddenly rose to his feet. The movement was so unexpected from the Forgotten Dragon that it drew every eye. "No," Long said, his voice carrying a power that hadn't been there before. "I have been silent too long. I have let you dismiss me, mock me, forget my existence. But I will not let you walk blind into catastrophe." Laughter started again, but it died quickly. Long's clouded eyes had begun to glow with an inner light that grew brighter with each word. "You ask what use is a blind dragon? I will tell you. A blind dragon sees what others miss because they are distracted by the surface. You see strength and miss the rot beneath. You see logic and miss the trap it conceals. You trust your eyes and so are deceived by illusion." The governor's assistant stepped back, his hand moving to his pendant. "This is the delusional creature you've let ramble in our councils. Guards, remove him." But Long continued, his voice now echoing with harmonics that resonated in the bones of all present. 3 days ago, the Jade Mountain Monastery fell. But the attackers didn't seek simple plunder. They took the Scroll of Binding and 3 other specific texts, the Chronicle of Oaths, the Map of Dragon Lines, and the Seal of the First Compact. Ask yourself, what bandit would even know these existed? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. These were indeed the most sacred and secret texts, their very existence known only to scholars and high officials. The grain shipments that vanished. Long continued. Check the records. Each one was diverted through shipping orders that originated from this very building. The wells that run dry? Test them for poison, saltpeter, to be precise. Harmless in small doses, but deadly to water sources over time. The assistant's face had gone pale. His hand clutched the pendant tightly now, and those nearest could see it pulsing with an ugly green light. "And the proposal to divide our forces?" Long's voice rose to a crescendo. "Within 3 days of separation, each region will face a coordinated attack. Not from random bandits, but from a mercenary army hired with the gold from a dozen stolen temple treasuries. An army that knows exactly where each dragon will be, how their powers work, and what their weaknesses are. Information that could only come from someone with intimate access to our defense plans." "Lies," the assistant shouted. The ravings of a crippled beast seeking attention. But doubt had been planted. Dragons and humans alike began to recall small inconsistencies, moments of unease. The golden dragon himself turned to look at his rider's assistant with new suspicion. Yinlong raised his head higher. You want proof? In exactly 10 heartbeats, a messenger will burst through those doors with news of an attack on the southern granary. The attack is happening as we speak, timed to coincide with our vote to divide. The enemy believed we would be too fractured to respond effectively. Everyone turned to the doors. The silence stretched. 10 heartbeats passed. Then 20. The assistant began to smile. Then the doors burst open. A messenger, wounded and exhausted, stumbled in. The southern granary under attack. Organized forces, not bandits. They knew exactly where. Chaos erupted. The assistant tried to flee, but found his path blocked by dragons whose eyes now burned with fury at the betrayal. His pendant flared with sickly light, and he spoke words in a language that hurt to hear. Master waits. The shadow rises. Your time of dominance ends. The new age. His words cut off as the golden dragon's tail swept him into a pillar. The pendant shattered, releasing a cloud of dark energy that dissipated with a sound like screaming wind. The assistant collapsed, his mind apparently shattered with his talisman. In the confusion that followed, Yinlong stood calm at the center, no longer the dismissed and mocked creature of the past days. Dragons approached him with new respect, seeing past the blindness to the power within. Ow, the governor asked, his voice shaking. How did you know? I told you at the festival, Yinlong replied simply. I see the threads of time, past, present, and possible futures weave together in patterns your eyes cannot follow. My blindness is not a curse. It freed me from the distraction of the immediate, letting me perceive the deeper currents. But why the deception? A war dragon demanded. Why let us mock you? Master Chun stepped forward, pride evident in his voice despite his earlier performance. Because the enemy was watching through their agent. If they had known Yinlong could see through their plans, they would have adjusted, found new strategies. By being dismissed as useless, he became invisible to their calculations. Yinlong nodded. The shadow controlling our enemy is old and clever. It guards against known threats, plans for obvious powers. But who plans for the intervention of a blind, useless dragon? My irrelevance was my strength. From the corner where you forgot me, I could see clearly without being seen. The governor took charge with new determination. The granary. We must respond immediately. And this shadow Yinlong speaks of, still hidden, Yinlong admitted. But wounded now, the destruction of the pendant severed connection. I can sense their rage, their fear. They did not expect to be exposed. The threads show me they will retreat, regroup, try again in a different form. But we have time now, time to prepare, to unite properly. Then you'll help us? The golden dragon spoke for the first time, his voice humbled. Despite how we treated you, Yinlong's expression grew sad, but determined. I have always served, even when you didn't see it. Every mockery, every dismissal, every moment of being called useless, I bore it because the threads showed me it was necessary. Pain is sometimes the price of purpose. The council reorganized quickly. With the immediate threat exposed, dragons worked together with new unity. The attack on the granary was repelled, though at significant cost. The assistant, when his mind cleared enough for questioning, revealed details of a conspiracy that reached across provinces, funded by ancient wealth and driven by a hatred of the dragon-human compact that had maintained peace for millennia. But even as they celebrated their victory, Yinlong remained troubled. In quiet moments, Chun would find him trembling, his unseeing eyes tracking visions only he could perceive. What do you see? Chun asked one evening as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The shadow retreats, but does not surrender, Yinlong said. This was merely its first gambit. I see darker threads weaving, plans within plans. The enemy learned from this defeat. Next time, they will not underestimate the powerless. You're not powerless, Chun protested. Everyone knows that now. Which is why I must disappear again, Yinlong said sadly. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The threads show me that my true test has not yet come. This was preparation, teaching me the strength found in weakness, the power discovered in dismissal. Somewhere ahead, I see myself truly alone, abandoned by all, facing a choice that will determine the fate of more than just our region. I won't abandon you, Chen said firmly. Yinlong turned his blind eyes toward his friend, and, for a moment, Chun could swear the dragon was truly seeing him. No, my friend, you won't abandon me. But circumstances might separate us. The threads are complex here, possibilities branching and rebranching. I see myself in darkness deeper than blindness, in rejection more complete than mockery. But I also see light beyond that darkness, hope beyond that rejection. The universe has been preparing me for something, Master Chun. 20 years of being called useless was just the beginning. In the days that followed, Yinlong worked tirelessly with the council, his time sight proving invaluable in uncovering more of the conspiracy's tendrils. Hidden supply caches were found. Sleeper agents were exposed. The network of corruption was mapped and countered. But success brought its own dangers. Some dragons, embarrassed by their earlier dismissal of Yinlong, overcompensated by demanding he predict everything, solve every problem. They didn't understand that time sight came with limitations and costs. Yinlong grew exhausted trying to meet impossible expectations. Others, particularly those who had been loudest in mocking him, resented his new status. They whispered that he had orchestrated events, that perhaps he was the true puppet master. After all, wasn't it convenient how perfectly things had aligned to prove his worth? Chen watched his friend navigate these new challenges with the same quiet dignity he had shown during years of mockery. But he could see the toll it took. Yinlong's visions were becoming more frequent and more intense. Sometimes the dragon would freeze mid-conversation, his consciousness clearly elsewhere, lost in the branching possibilities of time. One night, Yinlong spoke of what he had seen in his deepest visions. The shadow has a name, Master Chun, though speaking it aloud would give it power. It is older than our civilization, older than the compact between dragons and humans. It remembers when dragons ruled alone and humans cowered in caves. It seeks to return to those days, but with itself as the supreme power over both races. How do we fight something like that? Not through strength, Yinlong said. The shadow has had eons to plan for strength. It knows how to corrupt the mighty, how to turn power against itself. But humility? Service without recognition? Love that persists through mockery? These are weapons it doesn't understand. Is that why you endured so much? I endured because I saw no other path that led to hope. In 1,000 futures where I revealed my powers early, we lost. The shadow adapted, countered, overcame. Only in the timeline where I was dismissed as useless did we find this small victory. And it is small, Master Chun. A battle won in a war that spans centuries. As autumn turned toward winter, the regional crisis eased. The rains finally came late but sufficient. The bandit armies, deprived of their coordination and funding, scattered or surrendered. Food distribution networks were repaired and strengthened. The dragon-human compact was renewed with stronger bonds. Yet Yinlong grew more distant. He spent hours alone, no longer needing Chen's guidance in familiar spaces. His predictions became cryptic, focused on events years or even decades in the future. He spoke of preparing for a greater trial, though he couldn't or wouldn't say what form it would take. One morning, Chen woke to find Yinlong gone. A single scroll remained, written in the dragon's careful script. My dear friend, the threads call me elsewhere. What comes next I must face alone. You gave me love when the world gave me mockery. You saw worth where others saw only disability. That gift sustained me through 20 years of preparation and will sustain me through what comes next. Do not search for me. I go where sight cannot follow, where the threads of time tangle in ways that would break a mind unprepared by solitude and rejection. The shadow stirs again, and this time it will not underestimate the blind. Remember what we learned together. True power often wears the mask of powerlessness. The universe's greatest gifts come wrapped in what seems like curse. And sometimes being dismissed as useless is the highest form of service. Keep my story alive, but let it fade into legend. Let others forget the blind dragon who saved them through their own mockery. When the time comes, and you will know when speak my name to the wind, and I will hear across whatever distance separates us, until the threads weave us together again. Inlong, Chun clutched the scroll, tears streaming down his face. He understood. This was not abandonment, but evolution. Whatever Inlong had seen in the streams of time required him to walk alone, to once again become invisible to the world's attention. The other dragons searched for weeks, but no trace was found. Some said Inlong had gone to confront the shadow directly. Others believed he had retreated to master his powers more fully. A few whispered that the strain of seeing through time had finally broken him, that he wandered mad and blind in the wilderness. But Chen knew better. Somewhere, Inlong was preparing for the next movement in a cosmic symphony only he could hear. The blind dragon who had been dismissed as useless had proven his worth, only to choose obscurity again. It was, Chen realized, the ultimate expression of service, to save without recognition, to protect without praise. 5 years passed like autumn leaves on the wind. The crisis that had brought the dragons together faded into memory, recorded in history scrolls as the Great Drought and the Conspiracy of Shadows. Inlong's name appeared in these records, but already the details were becoming legend. Some scrolls called him the Prophet Dragon, others the Blind Seer. A few dismissed him as a clever fraud who had orchestrated events for his own glory. Master Chun, now in his 70s, had become the unofficial keeper of Inlong's true story. He lived quietly in a small house at the edge of Longshan, tending a garden where silver flowers grew, planted from seeds Inlong had once blessed. Children would visit to hear tales of the blind dragon, though most believed them to be mere fables designed to teach that disability didn't mean uselessness. The world had moved on. New dragons had emerged, born with powers suited to a changing age. The shadow that Inlong had warned about seemed to have retreated entirely, leading many to believe it had been exaggerated or defeated. Peace and prosperity returned to the land, and with it complacency. But Chen noticed things others missed. Ravens had begun gathering in unusual numbers. The silver flowers in his garden would sometimes tremble without any wind. And in his dreams, he sometimes heard Inlong's voice, distant and strained, whispering about threads fraying and time running short. On a cold winter morning, exactly 5 years after Inlong's disappearance, Chen was startled by a knock at his door. He opened it to find a young woman, perhaps 20 years old, with eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience beyond her years. She wore simple traveling clothes, but something about her bearing suggested hidden strength. "Master Chun," she asked, "I am Lin. I've been having dreams about a blind dragon. Dreams so vivid they feel like memories. The dragon in my dreams told me to find you when the silver flowers bloomed in winter." Chun looked at his garden where, impossibly, the silver flowers were indeed blooming despite the snow. His heart quickened. "Come in, child. Tell me about these dreams." Lin's story unfolded over tea. She was an orphan, raised in a distant province by monks who found her as an infant at their temple gates. Recently, the dreams had begun. Visions of a silver dragon with clouded eyes who spoke of approaching darkness and choices that would echo through eternity. In the dreams, Lin said, "He teaches me to see differently, not with my eyes, but with something deeper. He shows me threads stretching between all living things, patterns in the chaos. But he also warns that seeing these threads comes with a terrible price." Chun leaned forward. "What else does he tell you? That the shadow never died, only learned. That it has been patient, studying our peace, finding the cracks in our unity. He says," she paused, clearly disturbed. "He says the shadow has found a way to corrupt dragons at their source, in the egg, before they even hatch. That a generation of twisted dragons is about to emerge, and no one will recognize the threat until it's too late." The old scholar felt his blood chill. This was beyond anything Inlong had shared before his disappearance. "Does he say where he is?" Lin shook her head. "Only that he walks between moments, in places where time folds back on itself. He's searching for something, a point where all threads converge, where a single choice can redirect the flow of history. But the searching is killing him. Each vision shows him more faded, more translucent, as if he's becoming less real. Before Chun could respond, a tremendous roar shook the house. They rushed outside to see dragons filling the sky, not in celebration or ceremony, but in panic. The great dragons were fleeing something, their usual majesty replaced by primal fear. From the north, a darkness spread across the sky like spilled ink. Within it, shapes moved that hurt to perceive, dragons, but wrong somehow, their forms twisted into geometries that shouldn't exist. Their scales absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Their roars were not sound, but absence of sound, creating voids that made listeners feel as if pieces of their souls were being torn away. The corrupted ones, Lin whispered, just as he showed me. Born from eggs touched by shadow, raised in hidden places, trained to be everything true dragons are not. The twisted dragons descended upon the capital. The defending dragons, for all their power, seemed helpless against their corrupted kin. Fire that should burn met darkness that devoured it. Water turned to poison at the shadow dragon's touch. Earth itself recoiled from their presence. Chun grabbed Lin's arm. We need to reach the old council hall. If there's any coordination of defense, it will be there. But, as they traveled, the scope of the catastrophe became clear. This wasn't a single attack, but a coordinated assault across the entire region. Every major city, every center of power, was under siege by shadow dragons. Worse, some regular dragons were changing, the corruption spreading like a disease to those who fought too close to the twisted ones. The council hall was in chaos when they arrived. The governor was dead, struck down in the first moments of attack. The golden dragon who had once led them lay corrupted, his bright scales turned black, his noble features twisted into a mockery of their former beauty. He served the shadow now, using his knowledge of defenses to direct the assault. Among the panic survivors, Chun recognized faces from 5 years ago, dragons and humans who had mocked Yinlong, who had dismissed him as useless. Now they cowered together, their strength meaningless against an enemy that perverted the very nature of dragon power. "Where's the blind one?" someone cried. "He saw threats before. He could help us now." Others took up the cry, but Chun knew it was futile. Yinlong had vanished precisely because he had foreseen this moment. Whatever solution existed, it wouldn't come from desperate pleas for a savior. Lin suddenly stiffened beside him. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites. And, when she spoke, it was in Yinlong's voice. "The shadow strikes at last, wearing faces we trust, speaking words we long to hear. It promises power to the weak, revenge to the wronged, superiority to those who feel inferior." The corrupted dragons were not forced. They chose their transformation, believing it would make them greater. But corruption cannot create, only pervert. The shadow's dragons are powerful but hollow, strong but brittle. They feed on fear and despair. Deny them that feast, and they begin to starve. Yet defeating them is not enough. The shadow itself must be faced, and that confrontation cannot be won through strength. In 3 days, when the moon is dark, a portal will open at the place of first meeting, where dragons and humans first forge their compact. The shadow will emerge to claim its victory. One must meet it there, one who has been dismissed and forgotten, who knows the strength in powerlessness, one who can see without sight. I cannot be that one. My form is too dispersed, my essence scattered across too many moments. But I've been preparing another. Lin's eyes cleared, and she gasped, clutching Chun for support. "I saw him," she whispered. "Yinlong. He's everywhere and nowhere. He exists between heartbeats, in the spaces between thoughts. He's been watching, guiding, but he can't manifest physically anymore. The cost of seeing so deeply into time." A shadow dragon burst through the wall, its presence bringing immediate cold and despair. People screamed. scrambling for escape. But Lin stood firm, raising her hand. To Chen's amazement, silver light erupted from her palm, the same light that had sometimes emanated from Yinlong's eyes. The shadow dragon recoiled, its form wavering. Impossible, it hissed in a voice like grinding stone. The blind one is gone. His power died with him. Power doesn't die, Lin said, her voice carrying new authority. It transforms. Yinlong taught me that in dreams, prepared me for this moment. I carry a fragment of his sight, enough to see through your illusions. The creature lunged, but Lin moved with prescient grace, always where the attack wasn't. Each dodge brought her closer to the shadow dragon, each movement precisely calculated. When she finally touched the creature, silver light exploded between them. The shadow dragon's corruption peeled away like old paint, revealing a young dragon beneath, confused, frightened, but free. He collapsed, trembling, as memories of what he had done while corrupted overwhelmed him. It can be reversed, someone breathed. The corruption can be cleansed. But Lin shook her head weakly. Not easily, not without cost. Each cleansing requires life force. Years of life burned in seconds. Yinlong knew this. It's why he prepared multiple vessels for his power, spreading his essence so no single person would bear the full cost. Multiple vessels? Chen asked. Around the world, others like me are awakening. Orphans, outcasts, those dismissed by society. Yinlong visited us all in dreams, teaching us to see as he saw. We're his legacy, his answer to the shadow's corruption. But we're not saviors. We're just meant to hold the line until... She trailed off, her attention caught by something only she could see. Oh no. The shadow isn't just attacking randomly. It's hurting us, driving populations towards specific locations. The place of first meeting, it's creating a ritual circle miles wide. Every person driven there in fear becomes part of the spell. When the portal opens, it will have the power of millions of terrified souls to draw upon. Chen finished, understanding flooding through him. The shadow learned from last time. Instead of relying on agents, it's turning our entire population into unwitting accomplices. The battle for the capital raged through the night. Lin managed to cleanse 3 more shadow dragons before exhaustion forced her to stop. Each cleansing aged her visibly. By morning, silver streaked her hair, and lines marked her young face. Other defenders emerged from hiding, inspired by proof that the shadow dragons could be defeated. But for every corrupted dragon cleansed or destroyed, 2 more appeared. The shadow had been patient, building its forces for years in hidden places. As dawn broke on the second day, the pattern Lin had detected became obvious. Refugees fled in seemingly random directions, but the flow of people all led ultimately to one destination: the ancient valley where dragons and humans had first joined in partnership 1,000 years ago. "We can't stop them from going," the acting governor said during a hasty war council. "The shadow dragons are deliberately leaving that route open while blocking all others. People think they're escaping, but they're walking into a trap." "Then, we spring the trap early," suggested a war dragon who had survived the night. "Strike at the place of first meeting before the shadow can complete its ritual." "With what force?" another asked bitterly. "Half our dragons are dead or corrupted. The shadow has planned too well." Lin spoke up from her corner. Unconsciously, Chen noticed she had taken the same position Yinlong once occupied. "Force won't work. The shadow expects force, has prepared for it. But there's another way." Yinlong saw it, though the vision nearly destroyed him. All eyes turned to her. Despite her youth and exhaustion, she commanded attention in a way that reminded Chun painfully of his old friend. The shadow's power comes from division, from setting dragon against human, corrupted against pure. Its ritual requires fear and desperation to fuel it. But what if the people arrived not in terror, but in hope? What if instead of fleeing to the place of first meeting, they went there purposefully, knowingly, to renew the compact between our races? "You're suggesting we tell everyone the truth?" The acting governor looked appalled. "That would cause even more panic." "Would it?" Lin challenged. "Or would it give them purpose? Right now, they run because they see no option. Give them a choice to make a role to play beyond victim, and fear transforms into determination. Shin understood immediately. The Shadow's ritual requires unwilling participants, souls trapped by terror. But willing participants, people who choose to face danger for a greater purpose, that energy has a completely different resonance. It's still a risk, the war dragon growled. We be gambling everything on the hope that people will choose courage over fear. Inlong gambled everything on being dismissed as useless, Lin replied. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from embracing apparent weakness. The Shadow understands power, domination, control. It doesn't understand willing sacrifice, freely given service, strength found in surrender. The debate continued, but Chen saw the tide turning. Desperation made even wild plans seem reasonable. Within hours, a new strategy emerged. Instead of trying to stop the exodus to the place of first meeting, they would transform it. Messages went out through every available channel, not of defeat, but of opportunity. The Shadow seeks to corrupt our bonds, the message proclaimed. It wants us at the place of first meeting as victims. We will go as volunteers. On the night of the new moon, we will renew the compact between dragon and human. We will face the darkness not with weapons, but with unity. The response was mixed. Many thought it madness, a surrender disguised as strategy. But others, especially those who remembered Inlong's story, heard something deeper in the call. They began to move toward the ancient valley, not in panic, but with purpose. Lin spent the second day gathering others like her, Inlong's dream students. They came from all walks of life. A street sweeper from the eastern provinces who could see probability streams, a mute girl who could cleanse corruption through touch, an elderly fisherman whose blindness had recently given way to time's sight. He visited us all, the fisherman explained, always in dreams, always patient. He said the universe was preparing a new kind of dragon, one that didn't need scales or wings. Dragons of spirit, born from those the world overlooked. Chun marveled at the foresight of it. Inlong had spent 5 years creating a network of unlikely heroes, each carrying a fragment of his power. No single person held enough to threaten the Shadow's attention, but together, the final day dawned blood-red. The Shadow Dragons had stopped their direct attacks, instead forming a massive circle around the place of first meeting. They waited like dark sentinels as hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the ancient valley. The place of first meeting was a natural amphitheater, where legend said the first dragon had descended from the heavens to speak with humanity's representatives. Sacred stones marked where that historic compact had been forged, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims' touches. As the sun set, the assembled crowd fell into nervous silence. Shadow dragons perched on every ridge, their presence a weight of despair. The corrupted golden dragon landed at the valley's heart, his voice booming across the gathering. "Fools," he declared, "you have delivered yourselves to your doom. When the portal opens, the Shadow will emerge, and your gathered life force will fuel its transformation. Dragons will be freed from the weakness of compassion. Humans will return to their proper place as servants. The weak compact between our races will shatter, replaced by the natural order of domination." Lin and her fellow dream students formed a circle around the sacred stones. Chun stood with them, holding a scroll, the last letter Inlong had left him, still unopened after 5 years. Something told him its moment had come. As full darkness fell and the new moon rose invisible in the sky, the air began to ripple. Reality twisted, and a portal opened like a wound in the world. Through it came presence so vast and ancient that many fell to their knees. The Shadow emerged not as a physical form, but as an absence, a dragon-shaped void that devoured light and hope. Its voice was the whisper of entropy, the promise of ending. "I am what dragons were before weakness infected them." It spoke into every mind simultaneously. "I am strength without mercy, power without restraint. I offer freedom from the burden of caring, the weakness of connection. Join me and know what it means to be truly mighty. Many of the shadow dragons roared approval. But then Lin stepped forward, and her voice, though small against such vastness, carried its own power. "You are not strength," she said. "You are fear. Fear of connection, fear of vulnerability, fear of change. True strength comes from choosing to care despite the risk of loss, choosing to serve despite the possibility of being dismissed as useless." The shadow laughed, a sound like dying stars. "You speak of the blind fool who scattered himself across time rather than face me. Where is he now? His fragments inhabit the weak, his power diluted to nothing. He ran from our confrontation. He transformed," Lin countered, "as dragons have always transformed, adapting to each age's needs. You remained static, trapped in ancient pride. He became something new." Chun felt the scroll in his hands grow warm. With trembling fingers, he opened it. Instead of words, it contained a single scale, silver white, humming with power. As he watched, words appeared. "When the shadow gloats in victory, when hope seems most distant, remember, I never left. I became the space between heartbeats, the pause between breaths. In choosing to scatter, I found unity. In accepting dismissal, I discovered purpose. Speak my name not to the wind, but to the silence, and see what powerlessness can achieve." Shen understood. He held the scale high and spoke into the expectant quiet. "Inlong, not gone but transformed, not weak but waiting. We call you back not as savior but as symbol. Show us the strength found in surrender." The scale dissolved into light that spread like ripples across water. Each mote found one of Inlong's dream students, and suddenly they were connected, not just to each other, but to every person in the valley who had ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or deemed useless. The shadow recoiled as something impossible happened. From the crowd rose not fear, but acceptance, not desperation, but determination. The very energy it had planned to harvest transformed into something it couldn't digest. And then, in the spaces between light and dark, between hope and fear, between power and powerlessness, Inlong reassembled. He was not as he had been. His form was translucent, made more of possibility than flesh. His blind eyes were gone, replaced by swirling galaxies. He was smaller than before, no larger than a human, but his presence filled the valley. "Hello, Shadow," he said, his voice carrying the weight of eons. "I see you have not changed. Still believing that power means domination, that strength requires isolation. Shall I show you what 5 years of being everywhere and nowhere taught me?" The shadow attacked, pouring its vast darkness toward Inlong. But the assault passed through him harmlessly. He existed in the spaces the shadow couldn't touch, in connection, in service, in willing sacrifice. "You cannot fight what doesn't oppose you," Inlong explained patiently. "You cannot dominate what freely surrenders. You cannot corrupt what accepts its own flaws. I learned this through 20 years of mockery and 5 years of dispersion. Every dismissal taught me that true power doesn't need recognition. Every moment of being called useless showed me that worth isn't determined by others' perception." The shadow's form began to waver, its certainty shaken. It had prepared for battle, for resistance, for heroic opposition. It had no defense against acceptance, no counter to willing vulnerability. Lin and the dream students began to glow with silver light. One by one, others in the crowd began to shine. Everyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. The light didn't fight the darkness, but filled the spaces around it, defining it, limiting it. "This is impossible," the shadow raged. "I am eternal. I am the truth dragons forgot. I am power itself." "You are fear," Inlong corrected gently. "Ancient and vast, but still just fear. Fear of being weak, fear of needing others, fear of being dismissed as useless. I understand, for I carried the same fear until I learned to embrace it." The assembled crowd began to move, not in panic, but with purpose. They formed patterns around the sacred stones, humans and dragons intermixed, recreating the original compact but with new understanding. They offered not submission to dragons nor dominance over them, but partnership between equals who recognized each other's worth regardless of apparent power. The shadow dragons, witnessing this, began to question their corruption. The promises of superiority rang hollow against the reality of genuine connection. One by one, they descended from their perches, approaching the dream students for cleansing. "No," the shadow howled. "You are dragons. You're meant to rule. Humans are beneath you." "Nothing is beneath anyone," the golden dragon said, his corruption finally breaking. "That was the lie you fed us, that worth comes from being above others. But Yinlong taught us that worth comes from lifting others up." The portal behind the shadow began to shrink. Its anchor in this reality, the fear and division it fed on, was disappearing. The shadow itself grew smaller, its vast form condensing as its power source dwindled. "This isn't over," it snarled. "I am eternal. I will return when you grow complacent, when you forget this lesson, when the strong once again dismiss the weak." "Perhaps," Yinlong agreed, "but each time you return, we will remember. The blind dragon who was called useless, the orphans who carried fragments of sight, the moment when the powerless revealed their power. Stories have their own strength, shadow, and this story will endure." With a final shriek of rage, the shadow collapsed into itself and vanished through the closing portal. The darkness that had covered the valley lifted, revealing a sky full of stars. Yinlong turned to the assembled multitude, his form already beginning to fade. "My time in this shape ends," he said. "The effort of reassembling has spent what remained of my cohesion. But I leave you with this. Every person here who has been dismissed, every dragon who has been told they aren't enough, you carry the seeds of transformation. Nurture them. When the world calls you useless, remember that sometimes that's exactly what the world needs." He looked directly at Chun, and, for a moment, the old scholar saw his friend as he had been, the small, blind dragon who had never complained about his treatment. "Thank you, old friend, for seeing worth where others saw only disability. Your faith kept me whole when I wanted to shatter." Finally, Yinlong addressed Lin and the dream students. "You're not my replacements. You are evolution. Dragonkind is changing, becoming something that doesn't require scales or wings. Guard this transformation." The shadow spoke one truth. It is eternal. It will return in new forms, with new temptations. Be ready, but do not wait in fear. Live, love, serve. Find strength in what others call weakness. With that, Yinlong dispersed for the final time. Not into nothingness, but into everything. A silver light that touched every heart present before fading into memory. The gathering stood in profound silence. Then, slowly, dragons and humans began to speak, not of victory but of understanding. The corrupted dragons, now cleansed, wept for what they had done but were welcomed back. The compact between races was renewed, but with new wisdom. Lin approached Chun, her prematurely aged face serene. "He's truly gone this time, isn't he?" Chun nodded, tears flowing freely. "His individual existence, yes. But look around. He's in every person here who chooses compassion over power, service over domination. The blind dragon who was dismissed as useless has become the foundation of a new age." As dawn broke over the place of first meeting, the assembled multitude began to disperse. They carried with them a story that would be told for generations, of a dragon whose blindness let him see truly, whose dismissal became his strength, whose apparent uselessness saved two races from destruction. The shadow had been